ShinRobjira.
Welcome, friends, welcome, neighbors, to the new figure reviewing setup. I finally feel like my figure reviews are at where I've always wanted them to be, and I am just so very happy with how this looks right now. I still got a couple things to work on when it comes to my figure reviews, not so much now in presentation, more just and everything else. But forget all that. Let's talk about the Bandai King Series Shin-Godzilla figure and the Bandai King Series Shin-Godzilla Climax figure. Final Climax figure, whatever you want to call it. Now, I've talked about both of these figures in full on this channel before. This guy, I believe, I think I did a video on 7, maybe 8 months ago now. But with this new setup, I said, screw it, let's talk about both of them at the same time, knock two birds out with one stone, and make it look awesome. And I must admit, this does look pretty awesome. But let's zoom things in for a better look. We're going to talk about the original Bandai King Series Shin-Godzilla first. Now this lovely guy right here, he was the star of my third ever figure review on this channel, and that'll be linked at the end of the video on the end screen where you can view that, but please, you really don't have to. I'm just saying options are there, giving you options. But I'm happy to say that my opinion on this guy really hasn't changed too much. Yeah, I do see some of the faults a lot of people had with him, but a figure has to be pretty awful for me to dislike it, and I do not dislike this figure at all. The detail on this figure is grisly, to say the least. Like, there is a lot of truly crazy awesome detail on him, and no matter what angle you have him sitting or standing, you're going to get an eyeful. One of my major complaints with this figure originally was just the lack there of paint. Yes, we've got paint on the neck and on the chest over here. Differing from the Bandai Movie Monster series version of this figure, he actually has paint on his thighs. He does have paint on his back and at the base of most of his dorsal plates. As you can see, some orange over here. It seems to differ upon which side you're looking at, because as you can see right here, this dorsal plate has a lot of orange on it. The other side really doesn't. Most of that orange reddish paint will be present on Shin-Godzilla's back, a little bit on the base of the center row of dorsal plates, and that's pretty much it. We do have a lot of paint on the tip of Shin-Godzilla's tail, which holds his Siamese twin head, and that in and of itself makes the tip of the tail one beautiful looking part of the figure, whilst also looking rather nightmarish with the presence of that face on there. Other than the places that I just mentioned, the only place you're going to find paint will be on the teeth, the eyes, on both sides, and on Shin-Godzilla's pretty grody looking feet. A lot of the extra toenails, like on the side or over here, were not painted. At the time of this figure's release, we only had, I think, one picture, and the picture really wasn't all too helpful in showing what we would be getting differently, aside from the position of the tail and the size of the figure. So I was expecting a little bit more red. In that review, I stated that I was really hoping to see more red along the ridges of Shin-Godzilla's tail and such. Even on his arms, I was actually really surprised that there was no paint on his arms. But aside from everything that we didn't get on this figure, I was pretty happy with what we got on the figure overall. I think it's safe to say that it's time to go into articulation, so the arms can go all the way around. Oof, yeah. I got this guy in the dead of summer, and this arm's a little squishier than it should be. The legs are pretty hard to work with because they're so stiff still, even after this guy being delivered in the heat of the summer. But the legs can go all the way around. Do I really need to show you all the other leg? The answer is yes, of course I do. So both legs will go all the way around. And much like his Bandai Movie Monster series counterpart, there is no articulation in any point of the tail, and there is no articulation in the head. So aside from this figure not having as much paint as I would have liked, and what minimal articulation he does have, which I was expecting anyway, I really like the Bandai King Series Shin-Godzilla figure. The uneven paint, that never really bothered me. I feel like nobody really got the Shin-Godzilla look correct, except for like X+. But you know, for 30 bucks, this is a big boy with a lot of really great details, decent paint apps, and decent articulation. Now let's move on over to the final Climax version of this guy. There we go. Oh man, this guy looks fantastic in the new lighting. I'm sorry, I'm fangirling a little bit. But this is the alternate version of the Bandai King Series Shin-Godzilla figure. It was released sometime after the movie, and I believe its starting price was about $135. at pre-order. After pre-orders went out and resellers started reselling, this guy commanded some pretty redonkulous prices. To this very day, I do not support those prices, nor do I think this figure is worth that price, even the starting price. Thankfully, my boy Tom hooked me up with this guy. Now, obviously, you can see a lot of difference between this figure and the original, so let's do a quick comparison. Starting off in one of the more obvious areas is the head. As you can see, compared to the original, Shin-Godzilla has a much more gaping mouth now, and it is covered with this metallic purple pink paint, which looks fantastic despite this side having a little bit of spatter on it. That purple and pink paint obviously goes over to the dorsal plates and to the side of Shin's neck, or his gills, I think they are, unless they're just more heat vents, I'm not very sure. But as you can see between these two pictures, there is another difference, and that is the detail on the neck. It feels like the detail on the neck for the final Climax version was definitely lost in translation. I don't know if that's an after effect of resculpting an already present figure. I'm not very sure what Bandai's method is when it comes to making their figures, but you can definitely see a drop in the detail quality with this figure, in some areas at least. And as you can see, the original Shin has a pure white eye with a very visible pupil. Why that wasn't painted, I don't know. And the final Climax version has a pure silver eye that's meant to represent the film that went over his eyes when he prepared his onslaught against Japan. Here's a better look at the two necks. As you can see, there is definitely a drop in quality there when it comes to the detail. The final Climax version's neck, it just seems muddied, it seems a little untouched, while the originals has all this crazy like wood bark-esque looking detail. Between the two bodies, you're going to get the same sculpt, but you're going to get more and more paint. As you can see, the final Climax version of Shin-Godzilla, the red paint from the chest carries over towards the shoulders a little bit more and up towards the neck, while the original just had it on the chest and the neck. And the final Climax version has more paint going towards his crotch and on the sides near his waist, which I thought was really, really cool. And as you can see, the final Climax boy has more paint on his thighs and he has paint on his kneecaps, where the original does not. And looking at this picture, it looks like the original Bandai King Series Shin. It looks like his toenails are a little bit paler, while the final Climax version has a little bit more of a yellow shade, like a bone yellow shade to it. That was an interesting choice. I honestly don't think I caught that before. Just to show off what I meant about Climax Shin having more paint on his sides, here are two pictures. Yes, this is not present on the original. The original's paint essentially ended at his, I guess you could say his rib cage, so everything below this area right here did not have paint. Moving on to the dorsal plates, I really love that the final Climax version has purple and pink with this translucent purple as the base. It looks really good, whether it's in light or not, but I do feel the detail was a bit masked by all the paint that was used. Moving over to this picture over here, you can definitely see the presence of more detail. I'm not saying the final Climax version is bad looking in any way or form. I prefer the final Climax version, but this weird drop in detail for this $120 figure is really interesting, because looking below the dorsal plates, you can definitely see what I'm talking about here. The original has so much definition between the wrinkles and the scarring of his skin, while the final Climax version, it looks a little bit more bubbly, a little bit more plastic, if you will. Looking at the two tails, they look pretty much the same. Yet again, the original I felt had a little bit more detail than the final Climax version, but something that I love about the final Climax version over the original is just that the tail is fully painted dorsal plate wise. We still don't have red paint in between the ridges of the tail, though this time I was not expecting that. From the base of Shin-Godzilla's tail to about the midsection, it is metallic pink paint, but once you get to the newer implemented section of the tail, it becomes much more translucent, and as you get towards the tip, it's even more translucent, and this part of the tail really does shine in the light. Although I will have to say, the original's tip of the tail, I feel, is definitely better looking than the newer one. Now, don't get me wrong, I love the sculpt of the newer one, and we'll cover why very shortly, and I really do like the dark purple on top of the metallic pink, but it definitely feels like a lot was lost in that. With the original, you had this base red with black on top, and it really highlighted all the fantastic detail. Yeah, you could argue that the final Climax version has that very same feel about it, but like I said, it definitely feels a little bit more muddy, a little less HD, if you will. But when it comes to looking at the face at the tip of the tail, obviously with the original, it wasn't much of a face, but when it comes to the final Climax version, the mouth is open, there's an inner mouth, you can see the eye within the eye socket. This is the one part that I will take over the original because it looks really good. The sculpting on the teeth, both inside and out, the eye in there. This is terrifying looking. It's shiny and terrifying looking. Absolutely zero contest when it comes to the tip of Shin's tail, the very, very tip. The rest, I will definitely say the original had the better detail. And then moving on to the only other thing that was changed between the two figures, the inside of Final Climax Shin's mouth. It is terrifying, it is flowery, it is a whole bunch of other things that I'm probably not allowed to say on YouTube, but it is fantastic. None of the detail was lost with the metallic paint, and I love that. It's a lot like the Bandai Movie Monsters series, Final Climax Shin. A lot of great detail, a lot of great sparkle in it. Really, really looks great in the light, and I like that they attempted to add a little bit of detail in the splitting of the jaw. Yet again, like I said in that video, I really do wish that the split of the jaw was a little bit more prominent on the Bandai figures. This figure essentially has the same amount of articulation as well. So aside from a few muddy details here and there on the figure, and a couple of paint choices being a little bit questionable, I definitely think this is the better version of the Bandai King Series figure, and I really wish that Bandai would just re-release this guy with a normal price tag, because this guy is way too cool, and I know a lot of Shin-Godzilla fans that won't even look in this guy's direction because of that obnoxious price gap. When it comes to these two figures, I might prefer the Final Climax version over the original, but I do feel they are both pretty solid figures. The additions in paint and in sculpt for the Final Climax version I feel should have already been present on the original. Like the longer tail, that was something I commented on in my original review. I felt the tail should have been a little bit longer on the original. Thankfully, that was fixed. Again, it's just for the price. Come on, Bandai, why are you doing this to people? The addition of more paint and the new paint really puts me in favor of this guy more, and I just really love how the Final Climax version of Shin-Godzilla looks with the unhinged jaw, the split jaw, and everything, and the purple, red, and black are just a really cool combination for a figure, even if some of the paint application is a little bit messy. But what say you? Sound off in the comment section below. Tell me how you feel about these Bandai King Series Shin-Godzilla figures, Shin-Godzilla, Shin-Gojira. I've been alternating between the two all throughout the video, and I apologize for that. And I will see you all very soon with more of Rob's Godzilla Room Reviews. We are almost done with Godzilla for this portion of Rob's Godzilla Room Reviews. We only have a couple more figures left, and then we'll be getting into Godzilla's foes. I have been ShinRobjira. May Skriyank be with you all, and I will see you all tomorrow. God, I just love how this setup looks on camera. Oof.